This is Chris Foster, and you're watching the Break It Down Show.
Hell yeah, I love it. I love that we get to live this life, Chris. Well, first off, we live in California, which is a pretty sweet deal. But also, we get to have these conversations regularly that blow our minds, or that blow the other person's mind, or just enrich the world in our own little way. And so, I wanted to get your thoughts on the value that you get. Forget financial, just the wisdom, the well-being that you get from running. Like Menfolk Journeys. This is the
Yeah,
name of his show. This is the Break It Down show, obviously, but what's the value of that experience for you?
it's a great question. And, when you're little and you're learning stuff, you can sometimes feel like your synapses in your brain forming, right? Anytime you learn something new, your brain starts to electrify a little bit and you're building this stuff. It's kind of like building physical muscle, but you're building these brain connections. And I remember like in third grade when we started to get real math, and I was like, "Fuck," right? And I come home and I'm tired, and I'm like, oh my God, what is this? And I'm doing division and long division, and I'm like, whoa. But the next day, I can do it, and it's tiring, but you're building your brain stuff, right? I mean, that's when kids, I remember my daughter would say, math is so stupid. I'm never going to be a math. I'm like, I know, but you're going to be a brain. You have to build your
Hmm.
brain, right? Math builds your brain, right? So, so the value that I get with some of these conversations, Pete, is just kind of like that. I'm creating not only new things in my brain to think about, but there's a connection with other men that's happening, and we're both building our brains at the same time in similar yet different ways, right? We're both learning something about one another in our conversations, and not only are we learning about the other person, but in doing so you start learning about yourself, right? You start thinking about things, right? How do I think about things, right? It's a very different approach than just having an experience, right? It's the idea of thinking about the experience is different. And so when I have these conversations with men, man, every single time I'm like, oh, what an incredible conversation. What an incredible man. This guy's awesome. This guy's amazing. And he's got so much to share. And I recognize that, everybody's got such a terrific life and story, right? They do. And I've learned, Pete, that there's a through line with every man I've talked with, right? There's some kind of theme that consistently goes through their lives. I mean, when you and I chatted, I learned that you are an extremely perceptive person. You just are. Your antennas out, and you're aware, and you pick up clues that other people don't, and you see things that other people might look over. And so you're paying attention, right? It must be exhausting at times because you're tuning
Yeah.
in. But every single person has that, and so the value that I get is learning about this other person and having this, having an intimate connection with someone, and having that someone have an intimate connection with me. And to me, not only is it valuable, but it's invaluable, right? I don't know how you put a price on it.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of wisdom in these shows. It's funny. I'll go back and I'll listen to an episode. I try to make it a habit. Haven't successfully done that, but every time I go back and I listen, I truly sit with the episode. I'm like, oh my gosh, let me take some notes. And I was there. I was there.
Right.
and 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 if I allow myself to be open and to learn, which is not an easy thing, that's an advanced skill to, like, not just I've been here before, right? Yeah, I have been here before, but the person I sat with was incredible, and our vibe and the things we both shared and the way I was able to partially crack them open and their willingness to go on that journey with me, that's not a common thing. It goes to that perception thing you're talking about. And so I enjoy, this sounds arrogant and self-righteous and everything, but I enjoy listening to my old episodes enough that I should be doing it more, because there's so much, just for me, there's so much
Yeah.
density of information in there.
Yeah. And I think that, for you, you've had thousands of conversations, thousands of conversations, and not just recorded on your podcast, but of all the people that you've talked to in your life, especially in dodgy situations, right? Where the conversation had to go in a way that everyone came out okay. I think that, you have learned you personally, Pete, have learned so much of how to engage and have a dialogue with someone, how to converse with someone so that they feel like they're being heard.
Yeah.
And that is a skill. That's a rare talent. I think a lot of people talk so they can talk.
Yeah, yeah. The one of the things that I would do when I was trying to partner with somebody, whether they're a criminal or a commander, was I tried to do what I call fence building. Like, hey, I'm building my fence. It's going this way, and they're like, oh, I've got a fence too. And then we know that at some point we're going to start to intersect, and then we're going to have the same fence because we realize that we have this common property that makes us men in this case, but makes us leaders, or puts us in this position. And when we're a lot more alike than we're not,
Yeah.
and boy, that relatability, man, it's people talk about you got to build the rapport, and you do have to build rapport, but there's design in rapport, there's metrics in rapport, and you don't get to determine when you have rapport with somebody else. Same thing with
Mm.
trust is a higher, Pete would say trust is a higher grade thing. So the thing with rapport is, as you build it, you need to assume it's not quite as solid as you think it is, and allow it time to grow, and but nurture it all the time, and so that the rapport, like, you never know when you got it. It's sort of like firing a weapon. You just slowly squeeze the trigger. Oh, Jesus Christ, it
Right.
went
And
off.
then it happens.
Right, right. And so that's how I think rapport is sort of like that. If that analogy were, I think it does. But
I think
yeah.
your metaphor of building a shared property is brilliant, Pete. I've never thought
Mm,
about it that way. That's a beautiful visualization where together we're building property that we both live in, right? This is the
yeah.
space we're creating for ourselves. I think it's really elegant.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate that. And the point isn't to divide. The point is to unite. And it's
Right.
fine to have a neighbor and fine to have a fence. You can look over the fence, you can go around the fence, but the fence is just, yeah, it's just this way of looking at this where you don't think you're anywhere near the other person. But if you take the time and you create relatability, it turns out that you know I call them like the lowest common denominators just of humanity, right? So
Mm-hmm.
everyone wants their kid to do better than they did. I mean, that's just a universal human value. Nobody likes cancer, and so there's a certain number
Right.
of these
Everybody
things.
thinks cancer sucks. Everyone.
Yeah, no one's like, yes, I finally got my cancer. I'm going to lose so much weight. Um,
No.
but that's reality, right? And so if that's true, how do you gather these elements and look at them and show them to each other? Hey, look, I got the same thing as you.
Yeah.
Until you realize, oh, maybe we can work together, at least more than we thought we could when we first started this relationship 5 days ago or whatever it was.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's especially challenging for men. I think that, I don't know, I think that men have this built in, not all men, but many men have this built-in competitive thing, this built-in one-upsmanship, this built-in
Mm,
reservation, right? This built-in I'm going to make sure that I reserve anything that I've got in terms of vulnerability because I don't want to show that I'm vulnerable to you. Maybe it goes back to that thing you mentioned with trust, because I might not trust you to be vulnerable with you. Um, so there are these walls and, not just fences, but brick fences that a lot of men put up, right, between us
mhm,
and other people, where I don't know if women do that as much. I think that, when, even when we're playing as boys, there's some competitive streak, and maybe that's part of it. Maybe that's in our DNA. Maybe that's part of being masculine. Maybe that's part of having to be the alpha hunter, whatever that is, right? Whereas, when girls play, it's more cooperative, right?
mm,
And we're more competitive. And maybe that's just a thing, right? That men have to be competitive, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with competing. There's nothing wrong with trying to do your best, perhaps even better than someone else. But what that does is that conditions us, I think, to really put up these blocks of connection, and then it might not have been such an awkward thing in the Wayback Machine, but now with devices, tools, technologies, which really allow us to be isolated, which really allow us to cut off communication and personal engagement. I think that men now are struggling to figure out, how can I be a man and confident and competitive, yet at the same time be vulnerable and open and risk sharing or risk disclosing things about me, or risk just even, being honest with someone, so that there can be a better relationship. I think we're struggling with it.
You know, we've during our lifetimes, and we're not the oldest guys in the world, but we're not, I wouldn't say we were young anymore. We've seen a tremendous amount of change, our
Yeah.
attitudes towards all kinds of things. Just in things that we just said because that's how everybody else said it. And there's plenty of examples we can all think of. Let's not revisit that. But the one of the things we've done is we have created a society, at least here in America, where women are wildly more free than almost any other country in the world. And if another country is comparable, it's not going to be better. We didn't just get women driving. There's some things that it took a while to get to, but we've reliably created a real actual struggle for power, right? And as we've climbed this thing, I think men have been pushed down a little bit in masculinity and the things that are there, to where we've been taught maybe maybe this is a little bit unfair to the younger generations. I hate to be like the younger generation, but they've been taught to maybe tamp that assertiveness down, that competition down, because life can't be two circles atop each other. It's got to be Venish,
Yeah.
and if we're not Venish, then who's going to lay sheetrock on walls and
That's right.
do mud and seams and all that kind of stuff. I mean, not that women can't do that work, but dudes are built for that. We have shoulder power. You need shoulder power.
Yeah. I agree. I think that that's one of the reasons we're struggling, Pete, because I think what we're trying to figure out is how can you be strong yet kind? How can you be assertive yet respectful and courteous? How can you be masculine and powerful yet also sensitive enough and gentle to be aware that you shouldn't slap a girl's ass when she's carrying a tray of drinks beside you, right? There's there
Yeah.
right. There are
Yeah.
certain things to where there's definitely has been they this institution over the last X number of years where women were excluded out of the workforce, and minorities were excluded out of the workforce, and excluded out of areas of power, right? It's still, women are half the population, but they're a fraction of the CEOs in the world, right? And there's an imbalance, right? However, recognizing that there was an imbalance, and there's some corrective work to go on, and that there's some necessary understanding of the situations of other women and minorities and the like. However, no one wants a weak man, right? No one wants a man who's feckless. No one wants a man who doesn't have principle or some type of moral stature or some type of ethical strength. No one wants a man who doesn't know what beer he likes, right?
Right.
Right. There's certain things about manhood where, I don't know. And this is a theory you can't prove. But every man should probably have a sports team that they like, right? Why? Because at least they can talk with someone else about a sports team, right? They can talk about that, right? There's a social lubricant and a thing that you can do. Every man should, understand the basics of some kind of tool of some kind, right? Because I don't know, what if we start losing these things where we can be productive and we can be singularly masculine? I also think that's a problem.
Yeah, boy, there's
And
a lot of good stuff.
it's a fine line. It's a fine line that we have to walk.
There's nothing wrong with living however anybody wants to live. One of my favorite sayings is, I do my best, and look, I fail at my best. That's not my best, right? But I try to let folks be folks.
Yeah.
That said, yeah, dudes need to be dudes, and part of that is doing things like, I don't know. I was grocery shopping, just running some quick errands, for the team, and when I was there, I saw this young fella at the supermarket. He was climbing a ladder, and he was going to grab one of those, those plastic formed baby pools, just one big plastic. He was grabbing that on a ladder, and I'm like, oh, problem, because a lot of people fall off ladders every year, and he's at work, and there's no one else around him. Anything goes wrong, he loses his balance. He's at minimum jumping down 3 feet, if not 6, right? So I go over there, and I'm like, hey, let me help you out.
Right.
Because I know dude stuff, and I've been the guy on the ladder, and I'm like, "Ew, I got to be careful." And if he's not thinking all the time, like, how do I do this safely? And he wasn't. So I helped him, and he got down. We were all good, and I handed him the pool, and he walked that across the store, and I thought nothing else of it. And then I'm pushing my cart outside because I was shopping at the same speed as the lady who bought the pool, and she was going to her, I'll say it was a Honda Accord, some
Hmm.
car like that. And the guy's trying to get the pool into the car, and I'm like, "Hey, that ain't gonna work." This thing's one big plastic piece. And so I said to the lady, "Hey, you want to just throw that in the back of my truck and I'll just take it to your house, you know?"
Right.
And I'm just being a neighbor. And she's like, and it's not going to go in her car. There's no way, right? You're
Right.
not going to top go full. It's just too big. And so she nervously agrees, and she's like, "Where do you live?" And I'm like, I live about 2 miles that way over." And I told her the cross streets and everything. She's like, "I don't live anywhere near that." And I'm like, "You can't live that far away if this is your grocery store, like, it's fine. I've got enough minutes to help you out."
Yeah.
And so I drive her, baby pulling her, and I follow her and everything. And I'm not thinking anything negative at all. And we get out. She's like, "Okay, I'll take it from here." And I'm like, "I'm glad to take it to your front door, whatever you need."
Right.
And she's like, "Are you gonna kill me?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, no,
Right.
I'm just
No.
I'm just trying to help you."
Right. Yeah. No, I get that. I understand both sides of that completely,
Yeah,
right? Because, she's maybe nervous or vulnerable, right?
right.
And you're trying to help. And right,
Yeah,
suddenly there's this really interesting dialogue, and it comes with so much baggage in life, right? She might have had a really scary experience with a man, right? With a
right.
stranger, and you have no idea. You have absolutely no
Yeah,
idea. Um, and you're just being Pete. Hey, I got some
yeah,
time. I can help you out with this. This is a pretty heavy lift. I can help
yeah,
you out, right?
yeah,
You know,
right.
and so it's such an interesting dialogue now that we have, and it is a funny thing, Pete. That's where talking about that tension of how how do we, not only men but women and everyone, how do we get a lot better at having better conversations about, this is where I'm coming from, these are my intentions, you know this is this is how we can move into the world together. And especially, Pete, for young men, I think young men are baffled. I think they're
Mm,
baffled about what to do, right? They see young women, which is awesome. They see young women graduating college at a higher rate, earning as much. And so for a young man, it's kind of like, well, if I'm going to be with a partner, and she's earning more than me, how do I take that? Is she going to want
right,
me? Right? Is she going to want to be with me if I don't earn as much as she does? Right?
right.
What do I have to bring to the table now besides a healthier paycheck or a healthier thing? What is required of me? And a lot of these young
Mm,
men are like, I have no idea.
I have no
I,
idea.
I have
Yeah,
no idea
yeah,
what's required of me.
yeah. There's so many different angles to that. And there's a lot of couples that do this well, where the wife is a primary breadwinner and the dude's like, "I'll stay home, take care of the kids, and write
Yeah,
these books," and they can afford to do that, and they manage it right. And it's non-traditional, but here in America, it's not hard at all to find a couple like that
right,
where the wife is the main breadwinner. It really does happen, but there's still internal dynamics where it's okay for me to whatever, or to have girlfriends because I'm a dude and I run the house, and everybody who's home with me when we go pick up the kids, they're all ladies, in this case, because the
uh-huh,
moms are the traditional, and all of a sudden now you have these other dynamics that we haven't really dealt with before, and it's really interesting. I think about this when I've got friends who are from the Middle East, and I know their wives, right? But I
hmm,
purposely don't interact with their wives without those guys around, or
sure,
I'll say, "Hey, whatever. I was talking to your wife on Facebook," just so that they know that it's there because it's not the most comfortable thing for those guys. So there's still like this inner dynamic that we're trying to deal with in society. It used to be a thing like you're keeping your own last name or hyphenating, and that was all weird. And now like we barely even think about hyphenated names and
right,
these things. So we've made progress, but it's not as gentle as we want it to be. And there is an exchange of power with these dynamics. So I don't blame a young person, especially a young dude, for being I naturally want to go in this direction really fast,
right.
but I'm afraid of I'm going to run into a brick wall because everybody's told me that I'm not supposed to be this, I'm not supposed to be that, but no one's told me what to do with these emotions, these chemicals that are inside of me. And
That's
I
right.
do think that when I hear a mom say violence is never the answer, I'm like, hold on. Sometimes something's squared up with a punch in the face.
Well, and also, it is funny too, because when we were growing up, um, you know, uh, you know, kids got in tussles. We just did,
Yeah,
and things
yeah,
got, like you said, things got squared up. You're young enough, so no one gets really hurt.
right.
But there's a thing that happens, and you get through it, and you learn as you're a little kid that does that. And then I think that the like I said, the messages that young kids are getting, young boys are getting now is very confusing, right? And there are very
Mm,
few models that are out there that kind of show them that balance, right? If they listen to hip hop, a lot of hip hop lyrics are about being a baller and,
mhm,
having my own and all that stuff, right? All this stuff that is super misogynistic. Yet at the
right.
same time, um, you know, there's there's not this balance of, you can be this, strong, interesting guy, but also have, artistic sensibilities, also be thoughtful, right? You can have both of these things. I think one of the more interesting celebrities to come up over the last several years is Travis Kelsey. I think that he is a really interesting guy. I think he's a
Mm,
dude, like capital D dude. He's
yeah,
huge. Like he's huge. He's a strong ass
yeah,
dude.
yeah.
Um, Yet at the same time, clearly he has a lot of interesting stuff about him that he could be attractive to someone like Taylor Swift, who is an artist and an
Sure.
icon, right? So there's more to Travis Kelsey than just a capital D dude. He's got depth, he's got interesting stuff. He's I'm sure he's very thoughtful and very intelligent and very interesting in how he thinks about things. He has his own clothing line and the like. So he starts to evolve as this really complex masculine figure to me, where I'm like, okay, this guy's got a lot of this package, right? He's got the physical strength, he's got this incredible profession that he's really good at. He's a total dude, yet at the same time, and so I'm like, okay, so I think that that's one of the things that young kids are looking for is like,
Mm,
Travis Kelsey is out there on planet Mars, right? He's an astronaut.
right.
No one knows him. Um, but who are these models of manhood for these young men? Their uncles, their teachers,
Yeah.
the guy down the street, and I think one of the things that that I wish we would have is some type of better apprenticeship programs in the country, or
Right.
some type of ways in which they can connect with a master of their craft, or Pete, some type of service requirement, right? It doesn't have to be
Mm,
military service, but maybe there's a service requirement that happens when kids get to be 17 or 18, so that you get kids from all walks of life and all different ethnicities and all different income brackets, but they're coming together for service to the country, to service for the
right.
community, and have this shared moment so they can learn from one another. I don't know what the answer is, but I do know that we need some answers.
Right. Yeah, I interacted with somebody on Next the other day, and we were talking about, I forget what it was, but they didn't want to use any kind of language that would create an offense and get them canceled. And I'm like, well, what we're talking about is not offensive. And if someone
Right.
takes offense, that's on them. And if you don't mean to give offense, you can say, I didn't mean to give offense. I
Correct.
said this word or I did this thing. And it really was the thing where someone tries to take words out of your mouth. Like, I don't allow people to take words out of my mouth. I say whatever words I want. It doesn't mean that I want to be a jerk, but
Right.
you, whoever you is, won't tell me what I'm supposed to say and how I'm supposed to say it. I can evolve my own language in the way that I'm comfortable with. And I think that's a masculine stance. This person struggled with that and was afraid of being canceled. And I'm like, you can't be canceled. You cancel yourself, but you can't be canceled by somebody else if you don't choose to. With that said, I know people that have been canceled and it's ruined their lives and they struggle because of it. But they also did things that are odious. And so I'm not talking about,
Exactly.
you know, and
Don't
his
be
whole thing
odious.
is don't be odious.
You're
And
right.
the people that I'm thinking of that have been canceled for these things, they're still my friends.
Sure.
They're not perfect. I'm not perfect. I don't want to point the finger at somebody and be like, "You deserve to never eat again." I'm not going to be that person.
Yeah.
But we do struggle with how do you pay someone a compliment? I try to pay people even more compliments, and I'm willing to risk being slightly offensive to somebody. I'm not trying to be a dirty old man, but if I was to say to a group of young people at a wedding taking a picture, "Oh my gosh, you're all so beautiful. Don't ever forget that." I'm trying to guide them and like,
Yeah.
you are all gorgeous, way better looking than you guys realize, because they are. They're fabulous. They're fit. They're young. It's
Yeah.
California. Everything's
Yeah.
great.
And I think that there is a way to do that, and it comes off as good intention. I think that a lot of
Mm,
I do, Pete. I think that a lot of it is from the intention that comes in. I think human beings are pretty good. We're not great. We're not perfect, but I think we're pretty
mm.
good at reading intention. I do. I think
Okay.
that that we've been trained over millennia, well, more than millennia, hundreds of thousands of years, to look at somebody's eyes, to look at body language, to perceive small little things about whether someone's, coming at you with
Yeah.
threat or coming at you with love. I think
Yeah.
that we still have that. So I think that, and Pete, I'm with you. I'm a compliment payer, right? I am, like I just am, and I try to make
Yeah.
sure that I don't come across as being, you know that I'm not a trespass. But you know what? I think some people, I think it's okay to hear a compliment once in a while,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so my wife is always beautifully dressed whenever we go out, and whenever we go out, like ever, she always gets a compliment
Mm.
all the time,
Yeah.
100%. Either her outfit or her hair. Look, she looks fantastic. And they don't know all the beautiful, brilliant stuff she does in her mind. They're just seeing her, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you look really nice," and she receives it well. And I think that, paying compliment to other people, especially if you don't know, man, why not? Why not give that person a lift? Because the person receives it, and they're like, someone who doesn't even know me helped me feel a little bit better about myself today.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think you're great when you do that.
Yeah. I and one of the goals I try to set for myself every day, and again at my best, is I try to make someone's day. I either try to see someone who's unseen, or
Mm.
pay someone a compliment. I don't do the thing where like you should smile. I don't say that compliment because I know that bothers people.
Yeah, that is true. That's
But
wisdom.
I know you can safely compliment a woman's hair, and if it
Sure.
looks great, I'm not going to lie. I'm never going to do that, but I'm like, hey, if no one tells you today, your hair looks awesome, you
That's
know,
that,
and then and then
I let it go. But
just let it go.
that lands so well. How you just said
Yeah.
it lands so well. And I loved your. I thought it was really perceptive of you to say, see the unseen. The reason I mentioned
Yeah.
that is I talked with a guy a couple of episodes ago. He's 74 years old, and he was
Mm,
in a dark place in his late 60s, and now he's flourishing at 74. And he said,
mm,
I was asking him about his grandchildren and blah blah blah, and he says, no, I don't feel old when I'm with my grandkids. He said, I feel old when I go to the grocery store. I feel old when I go to Target, because I feel like I'm invisible, like nobody sees
yeah.
me at all. And it
Man, that's so
right,
good.
and it was really interesting. It was pretty. I felt a little bit sad for him, and he said, yeah, you don't feel sad for me, but it's a thing. When you get
Mm,
older, you become, you start feeling invisible.
yeah.
And so it was an interesting thing to say. So for you to say, gosh, I try to see the unseen, and I try to say, you are seen, right?
Yeah.
You have a purpose today. You are in the world today. You are meant, we are social creatures, and you are putting it out into the world. And if there was nobody in the grocery store all day long, that's a really sad, tragic thing. The fact that you're
Yeah.
here and other people are here, right? That's the purpose. You're
Yeah.
fulfilling a purpose today, and I see you. I think that's great.
Love
I
it.
love it that you do that.
Yeah. I do my best, man. It's it's not always. One of my favorite people to say hello to is the person facing outward as you walk by the security checkpoint, leaving the airplane, leaving the airport. That last
Right.
person before you're in the physical terminal, because
Right.
everybody just walks by that person. So I stop, turn, and I say, I see you. I know this job isn't the most fun job in the world, but you're keeping us safe. So from all of us that are going to walk by you today, well, thanks. And maybe they want to hear it, maybe they don't care. And it's hard to care when you're in that job. You're just like, I have to stay awake. I can't be on my phone.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, that's a person I like to see because, well, they are unseen. And your buddy that you talked to the other day, I've been saying this for a number of years now. Like, oh my gosh, we're invisible. We're invisible. So much so that my special someone and I were on a little couple trip that by ourselves. It was really romantical, and we went to this place. I'll say this because you'll understand. We went to this place in Ojai, a little bed and
Okay,
breakfast, and they
nice.
had this
Okay, perfect.
tiny little bar, like the kind of bar you'd find in Ojai in like a bed and breakfast. And we were sitting there on like the short L side of a very short L bar.
Hmm.
And there were three young people sitting there having a great time. And we are just, talking with each other, hanging out and everything. And all of a sudden, the guy on the corner. So I'm sitting on the pivot of the L, and there's another gentleman right there, right? And he's young. He's in his early 30s. And he looks at me and he goes, "Hey, I'm Dave. What's your name?" And I was like, "You can see me?" I didn't think it was like, because I was so used to not being seen, to have
Yeah,
someone turn around and say hi to me. I was just shocked, and I was like, oh my God. And he has no idea what I'm talking about, but it is weird when the bubble pops and someone sees you and you're like, oh yeah, I'm a human too. And it feels
yeah,
good to be seen and recognized.
absolutely, 100%. So yeah, so I guess what I would just say to anyone listening, that if you see, someone who's clearly older, right? The wise sage, or the wise, woman, just help them be seen. Help them be seen, right? That's one of the things I learned from Don. So
Mm,
I kind of pay attention a little bit more when there's an older person that's walking around, just to ask, "Hey, having a good day?" Just a little interaction, because when you're in the throes of, between your 20s and your 50s plus, where there's a lot of action, right? There's a lot of social action. There's school. That if you have kids, you drop your kids off in school, and suddenly it's a whole community of social action, right? If you're working in an office environment, or you were in the service where you just were surrounded by people all the time,
yeah.
right? And I think that we really take for granted that sense of social
Mhm.
connectivity, and that when you're not, it's really easy to start feeling isolated and alone and small.
Yeah. Well, I love that. Yeah, it's interesting. When you're thinking about the next guest to take, how do you pick the next man you're going to take on the Menfolk journey?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, so what I say when I have a thing called Pod Match, where I describe it, and I say, look, if you have like a book you want to sell, or a 3-point plan, or workshops and things like that, that's fine. We're not going to talk about that, because it's not really about what you're selling. It's about you and your journey, and who you are. So that kind of weeds out a little bit of the folks who are just looking at it for a promotional vehicle. So, and what that does, Pete, is that it filters then the folks who want to have a real conversation, right? So I'm really interested in men who want to have a real conversation about aspects of their life, how they think, and I choose guests that, um, this the story is important, but what's more important to me is how they think about their story, right? So when you and I connected, for example, you talked about how it wasn't just your experience, but how your experience taught you a way to frame yourself within the world, and showed you
Mhm.
how you really interact with people, and the things you had to learn about yourself. And to me, perfect. That's the perfect guest, because again, they're thinking about their experiences, and
Yeah.
they're willing to share, right? They're willing to talk about that experience in an open and honest way. I've got a guest coming up short in a couple of weeks, where he says, "Yeah, I didn't have a lot of trauma in my life. I had a really happy childhood, and man, I have a happy adulthood. My family life is happy. I, there's not a lot of like sad things to talk about." He said,
Yeah.
but then I wonder, I wonder why. I want, but so that's okay. But then he was like, but I wonder what that does for me. I wonder what that does for my outlook. And he said also, which was interesting, I'm a second generation Scientologist, and that might have had
Mm.
something to do with how I think about my life. And I'm like, well, I've never talked to anybody who's a Scientologist ever. I never
Right.
have. I'm kind of curious,
Yeah.
right? What is this like? But more importantly, it's less important to me that you're a Scientologist. What's more important to me is, how did that frame how you view your life, and create the principles around how you live? That's to me what I'm interested in. So, the guests that I like to choose are the ones who are thinking about how they're approaching life, right?
Yeah.
And man, we're still figuring it out. We're all figuring it out. We
Oh
might
my
have,
gosh. Right.
oh my gosh, I think that you reach a certain stage where you start learning about aspects of yourself that you're pretty sure of, the things that you are pretty good at, the things that you're not good at, the things you're really interested in, the things you're not really interested in. And at some point, maturity helps you just be honest with that, right? Uh,
Mm.
you know, um, I've never liked heavy metal music ever, and that's
Hmm.
okay. I'm not gonna like it.
Yeah.
That's okay, right? I'm okay with that. I don't have to pretend that I
Yeah.
like heavy metal, right? I don't like it. That's fine. But I like other kinds of music, right? So that's cool.
Mm.
Um, you know, I really like beer. I love beer. I think it tastes great, right? That's
Yeah.
okay. It's okay for me to like beer. And so I think that, even though we are figuring it out, the more successful men that I've met have a better understanding of who they are, and they're
Mm.
okay with their authentic self, foibles
Yeah.
and all, failures and all.
Yeah.
But they come to a better understanding. It doesn't mean we're complete at all by any stretch, but it means that we're just more comfortable with the man that we're becoming. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
No, I think it makes sense. There's a lot of stuff that we bring to our man party that doesn't really belong to us, right? And that's some of that inauthenticity. And there is a movement to be authentic, but you have to figure out what authentic is. Don't be authentic. Just, you know, I I are authentic. Just um, not because I'm trying to be that, because you put that trying in there, and so no, like what is authentic for you, and if it's confused and lost, that's fine. Like that's
Fine.
where you get to be, and like right now we have this whole conversation going on in the political world, and we're not going to have a political conversation here, but I think the trick is like the president has chosen to build a ballroom at the White House, and that means some demo is going to happen. And they talked about this months ago, but the meme came out, and it's like, look at what they're doing. They're demoing part of the White House. Well, the White House is a big thing. We don't know what it all means. They announced this a while back, and I guess maybe before that, the president said nothing's going to change, and then it turned out that changed because you know what, construction does that, and so we can withstand all of that. And I don't choose to get involved in whether or not the president is right or wrong. It's his prerogative, and he thinks he's going to make the White House a bigger, better place. Almost every president does that, from bowling alleys to. Have you ever seen that picture of the Truman White House where they've disassembled outside and assembled inside a bulldozer inside the White House, and they're keeping the external, you know, like now that's some demo, but they
Right.
had to, right? And so are we really going to pick those things to get, and we all have these things. I'm guilty of it too, but are we really going to pick these things to get upset about, or are we going to focus our energy in another place? And ultimately, Chris, I don't care who the president is. It
Exactly.
doesn't matter to me. It makes
Yeah.
no difference. Whoever the president is, you could pick anybody on the earth and make them president. It does not matter to me nearly enough, like as much as that. Like you and I
Right.
can still go find a coastal town in California, have coffee, and hang out and have a great time, and it does not matter
That's right.
because
That's
it
right.
just
Yeah.
I'm in charge of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think that I love that bow that you just tied where you're in charge of your life. I think a
right.
lot of people I think a lot of people forget that their life and their mind is their own. Um,
Mm,
you know, uh, I've been in this kick of reading the Stoics lately, Marcus Aurelius. We might have talked about
sure.
it, but so much of it is about, all right. Um, One of my favorite passages, he says, I'm really tired. Maybe I should just stay in bed. But does the bee stay in bed? Does the
Mm,
duck stay in
right,
bed? Don't they have work to
right.
do? Aren't they getting up and into the world and being productive, fulfilling their part, doing their role? The bee is up
Right.
and is doing its thing. Shouldn't I? Right?
Yeah.
Shouldn't I get up and
Right.
be and do my thing? Shouldn't I be productive and where I can contribute? And I think that there is um, when people say, "Oh, the world feels out of control," I'm like, maybe that is, but most of the entire planet are things you can't control at all. Of course,
Right.
it's out of your control. Are you
Right.
going to control when the leaf falls from the tree after it turns red? Really?
Right.
You're going to control
Yeah.
that? You're going to control the trade winds? Really? You're going to control the upwelling of the current? Really? Come
Yeah.
on. You can't control that.
Yeah.
Of course the world's out of control. It's out of your control. But you have control over you, right? You
Right.
have complete control over what you say. You have complete control over what you act, and you can sometimes our thoughts go crazy, and you have to bring it back in. But again, those are things that you can control and habituate. And so I find that as I get older, I realize that we have much more control over what we can do and say, and the life then that leads from what we do and say, than a lot of people give us
Mm.
credit for, right? Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of that. And I don't know what to do about that. And maybe this is just, how certain people are born and genetics even. But like when this country was beginning, there were people that were saying, hey, if it's not in the Constitution, it belongs to the people. And then a lot of Congress is like, nah, we don't trust us. Let's codify some things, right? But which is really true. I mean, they're like, nah,
no, I
and so
don't.
they started making a list, right? But if we act like we are as free as we actually are, uh, a whole bunch of stuff just falls away. And this gets
Yeah,
back to a couple minutes ago where I'm allowed to be more me.
yeah,
And most people don't want to be a jerk, but also you get to defend yourself. And I'm saying in all ways, you get to say, hey, whatever. Don't put words in my mouth. Don't take words out of my mouth.
that's right.
Don't tell me who I'm a fan of. Don't you if you have a question about who and what I am, the best authority in the planet, anywhere, is me. So ask me. And then
Right,
when I tell you, you should say, okay, I accept that.
right,
Even if you
right.
disagree,
Well, and
allow
also
me to be the authority. Yes.
allow you to be the authority of you, and I think that as I'm getting older too, Pete, I'm becoming much less judgy,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Because people have reasons for lots of different things, right? People have their own intentions and their motivations, and you know, I realize that I'm coming at my life now thinking about who I want to be, who I was, what I want to learn from who I was, who I am now, who I'm going to be next, right? And there's a lot about that. Most folks are thinking the same thing, right? And so,
Yeah.
I think that, you know, beyond just, being, you have to be courteous, of course, but
Yeah.
man, I don't know.
Or
I'm
not.
right, right. I'm a lot more tolerant. I'm a lot
Yeah.
more tolerant of other people's perspectives and than I used to be. I'll tell you that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And aren't you upset about this? I hadn't thought about it, so I guess not. Give
Right.
me a minute. Maybe I will be, but I bet I won't.
Or
But what
or
I would like to do, yeah, go ahead.
well, or maybe I'm not going to choose to be upset about that. Right. There's so many
Right.
things to be upset about, but uh,
Yeah.
my bandwidth is of being upset is pretty limited. So that I'm not going to be upset about that. That has no
Yeah.
bearing on my life. It has no bearing on, you know, the people that I love, the community. Right. It doesn't. This isn't a hurtful thing. I don't need to be upset about that. I can choose
Yeah.
that.
What one of the lessons I picked up through my show is we started this, I don't know, sometime after 10 o'clock on the nose. And I'm totally fine with that. If we were to meet up at a Lazy Dog to have a couple of pints and I got there 8 minutes late, you may not even be there yet because that's life. It's like,
Right.
oh, yeah, you know what? I got caught in traffic too. It's Southern
Hmm.
California. We wouldn't even care. So it's not that I don't care. It's not that I don't value other people's time, but no one's going to lose their minds or die if we don't start at 10, 1000 on the nose.
Right.
And letting go of that allows me to not be as harried. I still get there. We still do the show. Nobody can ever say, oh, Pete doesn't do this stuff. I do all of it, right? But does that time matter? And to me now, and I'm a military guy, it's like, hey, you got to be on time and all that kind of stuff. I'm not purposely late to things, but I also don't allow time to pressure me. I don't wake up from an alarm clock most nights, right? And
which is
so
awesome.
I have found, I know, and it's taken a giant rock out of my backpack that I don't want back in there. No, look, do I have to be on time for certain things? Yes. Do I attempt to be on time for everything? Yes. But if I don't, it's just not that important, you know? So, like, if I'm going to drive, let's say I'm going to drive from Orange County up to Hollywood to interview someone at their house, I'll let them know I'm on the way. We all know. We all know. Like, I'm on the way. I should be there at 10:15, just like I said, you know? And if there's traffic, I'm like, oh, you know what? My ETA is sliding. Everybody understands that, you know, and we'll
Absolutely.
all work on the back end. And so shedding that rock, and I learned that from the show primarily, has allowed me to be a better version of me. And I'm not carrying around this worrisome rock, you know, at most of my time in my life now.
Yeah,
I'm not bound by time like I used to be.
I love that. I think that that's very freeing. Way back in the Wayback Machine, when we were tribal, nobody knew it was 4 p.m.
Yeah, yeah,
It didn't matter,
right,
right? Right? It didn't
yeah,
matter, right? I mean, we got the flint, and we're gonna start making some fire for the evening. No one knew what time it was, right?
right,
It's really,
yeah,
and it's such a funny thing, Pete, because you know human beings created it. We created this abstract notion of time, right? Time actually doesn't really exist in the natural world. It's just, things just are. Things are
right,
happened
yeah,
before, things are happening now, and something might happen in the future, but there's no time at all. We just created it. And we do a really interesting job of human beings of creating these confining spaces, this compartmentalization, this organization that's abstract, totally abstract, and I
mm,
think that the fact that you're like, hey, time, like the clock, doesn't mean as much to me anymore. And I
yeah,
and I love that. B, I also think you're really gifted with beautiful, simple metaphors. The fact that you
mm,
said it was a rock in your backpack, and you just took that rock out of your backpack. Backpack's a little bit lighter. I just think that's I think that's a beautiful metaphor. I love it.
yeah,
I love it.
yeah. I learned that on the show from the DOC, the very famous rapper who was dating Erica Badu. She said, "You're holding on to things that don't belong to you. Put them on the ground. Get rid of them." And I
Mm,
was like, "Oh my gosh, you know, that's a brilliant thing to say. Just get rid of it. And then if it does belong to you, pick it back up. It's
yeah.
yours." You know,
Right, right,
and know
right.
that this is, yeah. It's like, oh my gosh. And so that's sort of the idea, is like I don't have to carry all this extra stuff around. I don't have to wake up mad about things or worrying about, I've got adult worries, of course, right?
Sure.
But
Everybody
I
does.
try not to let things get into the worry queue that don't belong to me, that I'm not going to change. I'm not going to change the environment. I'm not a bad person. I do my best to keep things clean, but and maybe I can improve that. But am I going to waste my time on that versus waste my time on? I don't know. But
Yeah,
that thing has to earn its right to get on my plate. My plate is full. I'm an
that's
adult.
right.
I've got a full plate. And if someone wants to put something on my plate, well, they'd better ask first, because I don't know where I'm going to put it. And most things that I'm supposed to do, I don't do if they don't fit on my plate.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I think as people, we have a our capacity gets bigger as we get older, and we get can
Sure.
handle more. I totally get that. But I think, to your point about choosing the things to get upset about, I personally right now, on Tuesday morning in Southern California, can do nothing about the glaciation in Greenland. I can't. Or
Right.
the
Right.
ablation. I can't do anything about that. Right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Nothing. What I can do, though, is other things about with my life, and the things that I can
Sure.
control, I can control. And so I find that life becomes a lot more joyful. Life becomes, every day becomes a little bit, um, I'm not going to say easier, Pete, but man, there's so much goodness around the
Hmm.
day if you look at it and pay attention to it. And if you think about that, then that's the stuff that can make the day worth a lot brighter, right? A friend of
Yeah.
mine, it goes, a while ago, we were all sitting there and having coffee, and he goes, "Oh, the world is on fire. This place is such a shit show. It's going crazy. The whole world is falling apart." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He goes, "Ah, blah, 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 blah." And I said, "Okay, well, time out, Johnny. If there was Facebook and, different news channels in, let's say, 1502, you would think the world was literally on fire. You would think the
Right.
whole place was going down. There's the Black Plague. The Pope is having babies. Mass genocide in the colonies, right? Terrible stuff happening with slavery.
Yeah.
Terrible stuff happening in South America, right? Disease wiping out entire tribes in North. You would think this whole world was just going to fall apart. It didn't. It's just the world is a freaking 9 billion people, and think about all the relationships with 9 billion people and all the stuff
I
that
know.
happens, right? It's a huge planet, right? Of course things
It's
are
crazy.
seem crazy. It seems crazy and it seems out
It
of
does.
control. Of course it does. I think that, but you know what? Newsflash, it always has been. Man, it
Always
always
has
has.
been.
It
Yeah.
always has been, right? I mean, we say, "Gosh, we've never known a time without war." Well, freaking ask the Romans. Was there ever a time the Romans weren't at war with somebody? No.
Right.
In
Right.
the 400s in Europe, was there never not a time when there was tribal warfare between Teutonic tribes? No, there always was. So it's a question of, how do I frame my world now that we have more information than ever before in the history of civilization, right? We have more input than ever, all these things happening all the time. Whereas, if it's, 862 and you're in, I don't know, let's call it southeastern Bavaria, you
Mhm.
don't know. You don't
You
know all the
don't.
shit show that's happening everywhere. And there's a lot of shit that's happening, but you just don't know. You're just not aware of it. And so you can manage your life, right? We're so aware of all of this stuff that it's incumbent upon us now to create these filters, to create these
Mm.
mental blocks, to say, these are the things that I can and cannot worry about. These are the things that I can and cannot control. This is the sphere of
Right.
influence that I'm going to have, right? And it takes discipline, right? And it takes an intentionality to say, I'm not going to get, sucked into the void of everything, because I guarantee you, if anyone was strapped down and forced to watch CNN or Fox or
Ugh.
MSNBC all day long, by 3 days they'd go crazy. You'd go
Yeah.
crazy. You could not process the input. And so the beautiful thing about, I think, the technology and internet and stuff is that we're the more most aware generation than ever. The harsh thing is that we're the most aware generation, right? So I think that the figuring out how to manage your inputs becomes such an important part of navigating a successful life now, especially for youngsters. And I know I kind of talk again about young men, but man, if we can get our young men to get off of the social media stuff just for a handful of days, just to reduce the level of input that's coming in,
Yeah. Yeah.
man, I think that would really help us.
There's a lot.
I'm
There's
sorry, I
been a lot
got
of
I got
powerful
on a
people.
total soapbox. Here I am. It's like
No,
soapbox time.
but there is, like, there's a lot of truth to that. When I talk to young kids in high school, when I go to my high school and go to my buddy's high school, I'll ask them what they're worried about, and then I'll basically say what you said is, like, if you're worried about the environment, are you going to be an environmental scientist? Are you going to spend 12 years in school to get a PhD to understand what this problem is like? No. Okay. Well, then stop worrying about it. It doesn't belong to you.
Right.
Like, do what you can, sure, buy the right kind of pants and all that stuff. Don't get played there, but because someone's always trying to play you. But um, well, focus on what you need to focus on.
Yeah.
And right now it should be like, you're 15. You should be trying to figure out how to get some tits in your hands,
That's
or
right.
or the other side, whatever, right?
Right. Right.
Because that's hard enough. So
It's very hard when you're 15.
yeah, you're like, look at them tits. I cannot wait until I get the boob in my hands. And I mean, that's where you're, and just take that simple, silly, funny, crass example and just advance it up through the years,
Yeah.
where you're like, I've mastered putting boobs in my hand. I can do it whenever I want. What is important to me. And we do take on harder things, but I'm not responsible for the environment. That's just not my job. There's someone else who's going to do that at a way bigger level, has way more passion, has way more credentials.
Sure.
And so, and here's the thing that's great is, on our shows, we can go grab a guy like that or a lady like that, and you can say, tell me what I need to understand. I do this all the time. The deal that was just signed between Israel and Hamas, I know a guy who wrote a lot of it, and I see all these memes about what Joe Biden might have done. They goes, that deal wasn't possible. I know one of the guys who brokered that thing. That's the crazy thing about
Wow.
these podcasts.
Wow.
And he said, and this guy, he's not from our country. He doesn't care about our politics. He's like, absolutely, Donald Trump made a difference. He made that thing happen, and it's not the first time he's done it. That my friend and the president have been working on the same conflict, right? So whether or not we like Donald Trump, this guy who's an expert in conflict, who gets hired by the other government, like the Taliban, like Hamas, they'll
Mhm.
hire him and they'll say, how do you help us be better? This person's well connected. And I even asked him, I said, the other day I had Wickoff and Kushner on 60 Minutes. And they did a whole thing and they talked about their process. He's like, yeah, that's their process. They come in, but in between, who's working on this thing? It's me, it's Linda, it's Steve, it's Terry. And we all work on trying to get these parties fence built so that they can get this thing solved. In this modern time, we can still talk to people that are available if we'll listen and understand how these things go together. And so why am I going to watch Fox News, or why am I going to watch ABC News when I can go directly to the source and
Right.
say, tell me how this works? And by the way, the next expert in line, who's just like my buddy, is going to say the opposite thing. Okay, well, that's life. That is
Right,
life.
right, 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 right.
We all disagree, just like when our founding fathers are like, if it's not covered, it's freedom. And this guy's like, I don't know. And so, you got this thing all the time. I mean,
Yeah,
that
it's
that
part of
is
it.
life. Yeah, it's managing experts disagreeing with one another. And so we can understand that, we can accept that that is part of it. And it's easy to look at all the negative things going on from our own point of view. And if we're going to use the political example, if the right is in charge, like right now, of course the left is upset and uncomfortable. It's not what they want, right? And so
Right.
they lose their minds. And of course, when it goes the other direction, the other side, the right is like, oh no, it's all
Yeah,
good.
they
But
lose
yeah,
their minds.
right.
Absolutely.
So some of this is just us pitching a fit, which we get to do, but frankly, not all that interesting when you can have conversations like this and try to mellow out and get to know people. And turns out, folks, we're all trying to do the right thing by and large. Like, there's some
Yeah.
people that are chaos makers, but that's not the norm.
Right. That isn't the norm. I think that you're right. Most people, I think that you would say a good healthy 9 out of 10, maybe 8 out of 10 if you're skeptical. They
Mm-hmm.
want to see other people do well. They want to raise their kids so that they're safe and happy and healthy. They want their kids to do well in their life. They want to feel like they're contributing in a value to the greater good. And
Mm-hmm.
generally, they want everyone else to get along and be courteous to other people and let other people live the life that they're going to live. And yes, I'm an optimist, but Pete, man, I have to believe that at the core, that's the way it is. And I haven't traveled as much as you or talked with people from different countries as much as you, but man, I gotta believe it's the same. I gotta
It is.
believe if there's, yeah, if there's a father in Lagos, he's looking at his kids. He wants his kids to do well. He wants to get along well with his neighbors and contribute.
Right.
Right? Doesn't matter if you're in, in Oslo or Lagos or San Diego or Pittsburgh. It doesn't matter, right? And
Yeah.
and I think is what I would ask, for men of different generations is, you know, what can you do? What role can you play? Right?
Yeah.
How do you contribute to the world? Right? And if you don't know yet, that's fine. But one of the jobs, I think, of being a man and growing into manhood is figuring out how you contribute to the greater good.
Mm.
Right? Right? That's
Yeah.
you got to do that. You just got to do
You
that.
got to do that. You got to. Well, listen, this has been an awesome conversation, and I appreciate you jumping on here with me. Let's for sure get together in real life, what we've talked about doing. But just
Absolutely.
thank you for everything. Everybody should go check out the show right down here, Menfolk Journey, right down there.com. You see it, and it's on Spotify, it's on Apple. You guys can know how to find that stuff. Anything you want to say in closing before we wrap this thing up?
No, the only closing thought is thoughts of gratitude and appreciation to you, Pete. I'm so grateful
Oh,
for
thank
your show, that what you do in terms of reaching out to thousands of men and women and getting conversations going, real authentic conversations. And I so appreciated that you and I got the chance to connect, because beyond just working through the media here, I discovered a lifelong friend. So I appreciate you.
Yes, I love it. Same. All right, everybody. We'll see you all tomorrow. And I'll say goodbye to you in a second here, Chris, and then we will talk offline in a second. So everybody else,
You
see you
got
later.
it.